The kiss was never supposed to happen, not in the middle of a heated argument over a failing campaign, not with the glass walls of her office exposing everything, and definitely not when Ethan had promised his daughter that work would never come before her again. But when Claire Hawthorne crossed the space between them and pressed her lips to his, silencing his anger and her own carefully hidden fear, Ethan knew something irreversible had begun. This wasn't desire. It was two broken people colliding, and neither of them was ready for what would follow. The alarm went off at 5:47 a.m., 3 minutes before Ethan had set it, because 7-year-old Lucy had discovered how to change the time on his phone and thought it was hilarious to make him panic. He dragged himself out of bed, his back protesting the years of falling asleep on the couch after Lucy finally went down. The apartment was small but clean, scattered with evidence of their life together. Her art projects taped to the fridge, his work laptop perpetually open on the kitchen counter, a stack of library books about dinosaurs she'd insisted on checking out, even though she couldn't pronounce half the names. Lucy's door was covered in stickers she'd earned from her teacher. Inside, she was already awake, sitting up in bed with her stuffed elephant, Mr. Trunk, balanced on her knees. "Did you change my alarm again?" Ethan asked from the doorway. She grinned. "Maybe. Breakfast in 10 minutes. And yes, you still have to eat the banana. But Dad, 9 minutes now." He moved through the morning routine with practiced efficiency. Toast, scrambled eggs, the banana she would inevitably eat only half of, her backpack checked for homework, her lunchbox packed with the exact right kind of crackers because the wrong brand would ruin her entire day. Single parenting had taught him precision, but it had also taught him fear. At the door, Lucy turned to him with that look, the one that made his chest tighten. "You're coming to the science fair, right? It's next Wednesday." "Of course. I already put it in my calendar. You said that last time." The words hit harder than they should have. Last time had been the fall concert. He'd missed it because Claire Hawthorne had called an emergency meeting at 6 p.m. about a client presentation the next morning. By the time he'd gotten to the school, the auditorium was empty except for a janitor sweeping up. Lucy had cried in the car, not the loud, dramatic kind of crying. The quiet kind, the kind that meant she was trying to protect his feelings while her own were breaking. Ethan crouched down to her level. "I will be there, no matter what happens at work, I promise. Mom used to say that too, and there it was. The ghost that lived in their apartment, the person who'd left when Lucy was 4 because being a mother had made her feel trapped, because she needed to find herself, because being responsible for another human being was suffocating her dreams. Rachel sent birthday cards now, sometimes a Christmas present. She lived in Portland with a man who made documentaries about climate change. She'd found herself, apparently, just not in a way that included them. "I'm not Mom," Ethan said quietly. "I'm here, and I'm staying." Claire Hawthorne arrived at North Peak Marketing at 7:15 a.m., exactly as she had every weekday for the past 8 years. Her assistant wouldn't be in until 8:30, which gave her an hour of silence to review campaign metrics, answer emails from clients in different time zones, and prepare for the day's battles, because that's what her job felt like lately. A series of battles she couldn't afford to lose. Her office occupied the corner of the building's top floor, with glass walls that offered a view of the entire creative department. She'd requested the transparency when she became creative director. She wanted her team to see her working, to understand that she demanded no more from them than she demanded from herself. What she hadn't anticipated was how exposed it would make her feel. North Peak had cycled through 4 creative directors in the year before Claire took the position. Each had failed in different ways. Too soft, unable to push back against impossible client demands. Too rigid, burning out the staff with 80-hour weeks. Too creative, producing beautiful work that missed every deadline and budget. Claire had succeeded by being none of those things. She was disciplined, efficient, unyielding when it mattered. She didn't accept excuses, because excuses were just elaborate ways of saying you'd failed and wanted someone else to carry the consequences. Personal circumstances didn't factor into her evaluations. Everyone had problems. Everyone had sick relatives and car trouble and bad days. The difference between success and failure was who showed up anyway. She'd learned that lesson young. Her father had been a literature professor, brilliant and charismatic and completely unreliable. He'd missed her 8th grade graduation because he was at a conference. He'd forgotten her 16th birthday because he was absorbed in a manuscript. When her mother finally left him, citing 20 years of being second to his work, he'd seemed genuinely bewildered. "I thought she understood," he'd told Claire. "I thought she knew the work was important." Claire had understood perfectly. She'd understood that loving someone who constantly chose something else was a particular kind of torture, and she'd sworn she would never be that person, the one left waiting, making excuses, pretending it didn't hurt. So she'd become the work instead. She'd made herself indispensable, excellent, irreplaceable. She didn't need anyone to choose her, because she'd already chosen herself. And she definitely didn't need complications like Ethan Reed. The Riverside Hotel's campaign was dying. Claire had known it for 3 weeks, but the client was still in denial, and her team was scrambling to revive something that should have been euthanized in the concept phase. The creative brief had been clear: position Riverside as the choice for business travelers who wanted efficiency without sacrificing comfort. But somewhere between concept and execution, it had morphed into a generic luxury pitch that could have been for any hotel chain in America. Ethan had been the lead copywriter on the project. He was good at his job, which was the only reason he'd lasted 4 months under her leadership. At 4:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, Claire sent him an email. "My office." Now, he appeared 3 minutes later, laptop under his arm, with the particular kind of exhaustion that came from too many late nights and not enough sleep. His shirt was wrinkled. There was a coffee stain near the collar. Claire gestured to the chair across from her desk. "The headline copy for Riverside is wrong," she said, without preamble. "We're presenting to the client in 6 days, and every piece of messaging feels like it was written by a committee trying not to offend anyone." Ethan set his laptop down slowly. "We've been following your notes from the last 3 reviews. Then the notes were wrong. Or you didn't understand them. With respect, Claire, we've rewritten this campaign 4 times. Each time, you've asked for something different. First, it was too casual. Then it was too corporate. Then it wasn't aspirational enough. We're chasing a moving target." Something flickered across her face, too quick to identify. Then it was gone, replaced by the controlled mask she wore like armor. "Good work requires iteration," she said. "If you're not willing to keep pushing until it's right, I am willing. But my team is running on fumes. Marcus hasn't seen his kids before bedtime in 2 weeks. Jennifer is so stressed she started having panic attacks in the bathroom. And yesterday, you sent revision notes at 11 p.m. that contradicted everything we discussed that morning." The air in the office changed. Through the glass walls, people were starting to notice. "If the work were good enough, those hours wouldn't be necessary," Claire said, her voice dropping to something colder and more cutting. "Maybe the problem isn't my notes. Maybe it's the execution." Ethan stood up. "You know what? You're right. The execution is the problem. Because we're trying to execute a vision that doesn't actually exist. You want perfection, but you can't define what that looks like. You just know it when you don't see it. Sit down." "No. I'm done sitting while you move goalposts and act like we're the ones failing. You want to know why this campaign feels soulless? Because you've stripped everything human out of it. Every time we try to inject personality or warmth, or anything resembling an actual emotion, you kill it because it's not on strategy." Claire stood as well. They were on opposite sides of the desk, the tension between them sharp enough to cut. "You don't know anything about me," she said quietly, and for the first time, her voice held something other than cold certainty. It held hurt. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. It buzzed again. Then a third time, the pattern that meant emergency. He pulled it out. The school's number. His stomach dropped. "Lucy, I have to take this," he said, already moving toward the door. "We're not finished. It's my daughter's school," he answered in the hallway. The nurse's voice was calm but firm. Lucy had a fever of 101.3. She was asking for him. She needed to be picked up within the hour. Ethan looked at his watch. 5:02 p.m. He turned back toward Claire's office. She was standing by the window, arms crossed, her posture rigid. "I need to leave," he said from the doorway. "Lucy's sick. The school needs me to pick her up." Claire didn't turn around. "We have a presentation in 6 days. I know. The client is flying in from Chicago specifically for this. If we lose this account, my 7-year-old is sick. There must be someone else who can pick her up. A neighbor, a friend." Something inside, Ethan snapped. Not the loud, explosive kind of breaking. The quiet kind. The kind that had been building for months. "You don't get it," he said, and his voice was shaking now. Not with anger, but with something raw. "There is no one else. It's just me. It has been just me for 3 years. Her mother left because being a parent was too hard, too limiting, too much of a sacrifice for her precious dreams. So yes, I will work late. I will rewrite copy at midnight. I will do everything you ask, everything this job demands." He stepped back into the office. People were definitely watching now through the glass walls. "But I will not become the kind of parent who puts a campaign above a sick child. I will not be the person who chooses work over her. Because I'm all she has, and she deserves someone who shows up." Claire finally turned to face him. Her expression was unreadable. "If you leave now, you're off the Riverside account," she said. Ethan smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Then I guess I'm off the account." He walked out of her office, past the desks where his coworkers were pretending not to stare, past the elevators, down the stairs because waiting felt impossible. In her office, Claire stood frozen, watching him go. Something in his words had landed like a blade between her ribs. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. She'd been asking him to be her father, the one who always chose the work. 3 days later, Claire called another meeting about Riverside. Ethan arrived, prepared to be fired. He'd updated his portfolio. He'd started reaching out to contacts at other agencies. Lucy was better now, the fever broken, but the fear had stayed with him. The reminder of how fragile everything was. Claire's office at 3 p.m. Just the two of them. She was standing by the window again, backlit by the afternoon sun. He couldn't read her face. "Sit," she said. "I'd rather stand." "Ethan, just say it. You're taking me off all major accounts, or you're letting me go. Either way, let's not drag this out." She turned to face him fully. There were shadows under her eyes he hadn't noticed before. "You were right," she said quietly. Ethan blinked. "What?" "About the campaign. About my notes. About all of it. I've been chasing something I couldn't articulate, expecting you to read my mind, and then punishing the team when they couldn't." He didn't know what to say. This wasn't the Claire Hawthorne he'd been working for. "I reviewed your initial concepts," she continued. "The ones from 6 weeks ago, before I started asking for changes. They were good. They were better than good. They had exactly the warmth and personality I kept saying was missing. And I killed them because..." She stopped, looked away. "Because why?" Ethan asked. "Because they felt too real, too human, and I was afraid." The admission hung in the air between them. "Afraid of what?" he asked gently. Claire's hands were shaking. She folded her arms to hide it. Of letting anything matter that much. Of caring whether it was perfect. She broke off. "This is unprofessional, Claire. No, I called you here to apologize and to put you back on Riverside. I want you to go back to your original concepts. Present them as is. They were right all along. Why are you afraid? Ethan asked, not moving. It doesn't matter. It does matter. You just spent 3 minutes telling me it matters. Something cracked in her carefully maintained composure. Because if I care, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. If I let myself want something to be good instead of just strategically sound, then it matters when it fails. And if it matters when it fails, she couldn't finish the sentence. But Ethan understood. If work mattered emotionally, not just professionally, then she was vulnerable, open to being hurt, open to being the one left behind. He took a step toward her. Then another. You think not caring protects you, he said. But it doesn't. It just makes everything hollow. You don't understand. I do understand. I've been where you are. When Rachel left, I spent 6 months trying to convince myself it was fine, that I didn't need her, that Lucy and I would be better off alone, and we are better off without someone who didn't want to be there. But that doesn't mean it didn't hurt. It doesn't mean I haven't been terrified every single day that I'll screw this up. They were standing close now, close enough that he could see the exact moment something shifted in her eyes. The difference, Ethan continued softly, is that I chose to keep caring anyway, because the alternative is just existing, going through the motions, and that's not living. I don't know how to do that, Claire whispered. Do what? Care without controlling. Want something without demanding perfection. Let someone matter without being terrified they'll leave. The glass walls of her office were still there. Anyone could see them, but in that moment, Ethan couldn't think about anything except the woman in front of him, who'd spent years building armor so thick she'd forgotten there was something underneath worth protecting. I don't know either, he admitted. I just know you have to try. Claire looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd known her, she looked young, uncertain, afraid. And then she kissed him. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate, like she was drowning and he was air. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and for a shocked moment Ethan just stood there, his brain trying to catch up with what was happening. Then he kissed her back. It was everything unprofessional, everything inappropriate, everything they shouldn't be doing in an office with transparent walls where half the creative department could see them. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathing hard, Claire's eyes were wide with shock at what she'd just done. I'm sorry, she stammered. That was completely inappropriate. I don't know what. Ethan was still trying to remember how to form words. I should go, Claire said, already moving toward the door. I need to. I have a meeting. Claire, wait. But she was already gone, leaving him standing in her office, his lips still burning, his heart pounding, knowing that something irreversible had just happened. Through the glass walls, he could see Jennifer and Marcus pretending very hard not to have witnessed anything. Ethan picked up Lucy from school the next day, still rattled. Claire had avoided him completely. She'd sent emails about Riverside instead of calling meetings. She'd left work early, something he'd never seen her do. The kiss hung between them like a question neither knew how to answer. He was so distracted, pulling into the school parking lot, that he almost didn't notice the familiar figure walking toward the main entrance. Claire. At Lakeside Elementary. She was carrying a canvas bag and wearing jeans, which he'd never seen her in. She looked different outside the office, softer somehow. Their eyes met across the parking lot. She froze. Ethan got out of the car slowly, his mind spinning through possibilities. What was Claire doing at Lucy's school? Before he could ask, the door burst open and Lucy came running out. Dad! And then, without breaking stride, she ran straight past him. To Claire. Miss Claire, you came. Lucy threw her arms around Claire's waist. I told everyone you'd be here for story time today. Ethan stood there, completely disoriented, watching his boss hug his daughter. Claire looked at him over Lucy's head, her expression helpless. "I can explain. Please do." Lucy finally noticed her father. "Dad, this is Miss Claire. She reads to us every Thursday. She does the best voices. Remember I told you about the lady who reads the dragon books?" He did remember. Lucy had been talking about the volunteer reader for months. The one who did funny accents and brought cookies sometimes and stayed after to help kids with their reading. He'd never imagined it was Claire. Claire crouched down to Lucy's level. "Sweetheart, I need to talk to your dad for a minute, okay? Can you wait inside with Mrs. Patterson? Are you still coming for story time?" "Of course." Lucy hugged her one more time, then skipped back inside. Claire stood up slowly, facing Ethan. "How long?" he asked. 7 months. I started volunteering before you joined North Peak. I didn't know Lucy was your daughter until 3 weeks ago, when she mentioned her dad worked at a marketing company downtown. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because," she looked away. "Because this is the one place where I'm not that person. The demanding boss, the perfectionist, the ice queen. Here, I'm just someone who reads stories and helps kids sound out hard words. And I didn't want to contaminate it with work." Ethan tried to reconcile the woman in front of him with the one who'd ripped apart his campaign notes. "You do this every week?" "Every Thursday at 3:30. That's why you always leave early on Thursdays." She nodded. "I block it on my calendar as a meeting. No one questions it." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something he'd missed completely. Under all that control, all that perfectionism, was someone who cared so much it terrified her. "Lucy talks about you all the time," he said softly. "She says Miss Claire always remembers everyone's favorite colors. That you helped Tommy learn to read when he was struggling. That you make the library feel like magic." Claire's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I don't have kids," she said quietly. "I never wanted that responsibility, that vulnerability. But every Thursday, I get to borrow that feeling. And then I get to leave before it gets too hard, before anyone depends on me too much. But Lucy already depends on you. I know." She wrapped her arms around herself. "That's what scares me." Before Ethan could respond, the school door opened and Lucy poked her head out. "Miss Claire?" "Mrs. Patterson says, we're ready." Claire immediately shifted, her face brightening with a smile that looked nothing like the controlled expression she wore at work. "Coming, sweetheart." She started toward the door, then paused and looked back at Ethan. "You can stay," she said, "if you want." So Ethan did something he'd never done before. He followed his boss into his daughter's classroom and sat in the back, watching Claire Hawthorne transform into someone who did dragon voices and made 22nd graders believe in magic. After that day, something shifted. Not overnight. Not in any dramatic, sweeping way. But in small, careful increments, like two people learning a new language together. Claire changed the company policy on flexible hours. No fanfare, no announcement, just a quiet email to department heads that made it clear. If someone needed to leave for family obligations, they could make up the hours later. The work mattered, but so did the people doing it. Jennifer cried when she read it. Marcus took his kids to the zoo on a Wednesday. Ethan didn't know what to do with the woman who'd kissed him and then fled, who read dragon stories to his daughter but kept everyone else at arm's length. So he did the only thing he could think of. He asked her to coffee, not in the office break room, not at the corporate Starbucks where they might run into colleagues, but at a small cafe 3 blocks away that didn't even have Wi-Fi. Claire arrived exactly on time, still in her work clothes, looking like she might bolt at any second. "This is weird," she said, sliding into the chair across from him. "It is," Ethan agreed. "I'm your boss. I know. I kissed you in my office where anyone could see." They did see. "Jennifer asked me if you were okay." Claire buried her face in her hands. "I don't know how to do this," she mumbled through her fingers. "I don't date. I don't do relationships. I definitely don't get involved with people who work for me." "Then don't think of it as dating," Ethan said. Think of it as having coffee with someone who understands what it's like to be terrified of screwing everything up. She lowered her hands and looked at him. Are you terrified? Every single day. I'm terrified I'm failing Lucy. I'm terrified she'll end up resenting me like I sometimes resented my own parents for working so much. I'm terrified that one day she'll grow up and realize I had no idea what I was doing. But you do it anyway. Because the alternative is worse. Not trying, not showing up, not being there. That's not protection. That's just giving up before you've started. Claire was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. My father chose his work over us. Every time. And watching my mother wait for him, make excuses for him, pretend it didn't hurt that broke something in me. I decided I would never be the one waiting. I would never need someone that much. So you became the work instead. Yes. And now, she looked at him, and there was something raw in her expression. Now I read stories to second graders every Thursday because it's the only place I let myself care about something other than deadlines. Now I think about you when I'm trying to sleep. Now I'm sitting here drinking coffee with someone I kissed in my office, and I have no idea what I'm doing. That makes two of us, Ethan said gently. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't need to have it all figured out. They sat there, drinking mediocre coffee, talking about nothing and everything. She told him about growing up with a brilliant father who never showed up. He told her about the panic attack he'd had the first night Rachel didn't come home, when he'd realized he was truly alone with a 4-year-old. They didn't hold hands. They didn't kiss again. But when they left the cafe 2 hours later, something had shifted. The distance between them felt different, less like a barrier, more like a space they were learning to cross. The coffee became a regular thing. Tuesday afternoons, when Lucy was at her friend's house and Claire could carve out an hour. They talked about work sometimes, but more often about other things. Books, childhood fears, the ways they'd both built walls to survive. Lucy started asking questions. Dad, do you like Miss Claire? They were making dinner. Lucy supposedly focused on her homework at the kitchen table. Ethan paused mid-chop. What do you mean? Tommy's mom said she saw you having coffee together. Are you friends? Of course. Small town. Nothing stayed secret for long. Yes, we're friends, Ethan said carefully. Good. I like her. She's nice. Lucy went back to her math worksheet. Then, more quietly. Do you think she could come over sometime? Ethan's hands stilled. This was delicate territory. Lucy had been 4 when Rachel left. She didn't remember her mother living with them, but she knew other kids had 2 parents, and sometimes she asked questions that broke his heart. Would you like that? He asked. Lucy shrugged, but her eyes were bright. Maybe. I mean, if she wanted to. I could show her my volcano project. Ethan texted Claire that night. Lucy asked if you could come over sometime. No pressure, but she wants to show you her science project. The reply came 15 minutes later. I'd like that. But Ethan, I'm terrified. I'll let her down. Join the club. I feel that way every single day. How do you handle it? I show up. Even when I'm scared. Especially when I'm scared. Claire came over on a Saturday afternoon in early spring. She brought flowers, which made Lucy giggle. She admired the volcano project with genuine enthusiasm. She helped make lunch and didn't freak out when Lucy spilled juice all over her jeans. Watching her with his daughter, Ethan felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't Claire the boss or Claire the volunteer reader. This was just Claire, sitting on their worn couch, reading a book with Lucy tucked against her side, looking almost peaceful. It was perfect, which was, of course, when everything fell apart. The knock on the door came at 4:37 p.m. Ethan opened it without thinking, expecting maybe a neighbor or a delivery. Instead, he found Rachel. She looked different. Her hair was shorter. She'd lost weight. But her eyes were the same, the ones Lucy had inherited. bright, green, and piercing. "Hi, Ethan," she said softly. Every word he'd prepared for this moment, every carefully rehearsed speech about boundaries and stability, vanished. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see Lucy. I know I should have called, but I was afraid you'd say no." "I would have said no." "Dad?" Lucy's voice came from behind him. She stopped, stared. Her face went through a dozen emotions in 3 seconds. "Mom?" Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "Hi, sweetheart." Ethan felt Claire move up behind Lucy, her presence steady. She didn't say anything, just placed a gentle hand on Lucy's shoulder. Rachel noticed. Her eyes moved from Claire to Ethan, understanding dawning. "I should go," Claire said quietly. Lucy's hand shot out, grabbing Claire's wrist. "No, stay." Rachel looked at her daughter. "Lucy, I came all this way to see you. Can we talk? Just the 3 of us?" Lucy's grip on Claire tightened. "I don't want to. Sweetheart, you left." Lucy's voice was small but steady. "You left and you didn't come back. You send cards sometimes, but you never visit. And now you're here and you want me to just what? Pretend everything's okay?" Ethan had never heard his daughter speak like this. So clear, so certain of what she felt. Rachel was crying now. "I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you. But I'm trying to fix things." "You can't fix it by just showing up," Lucy said. "That's not how it works." Claire spoke for the first time, her voice gentle but firm. "Lucy, would you like to go to your room for a few minutes? The adults need to talk." Lucy looked up at her, then at her father. Ethan nodded. "Okay. But Miss Claire, you're not leaving, right?" "I'll stay," Claire promised. "I'll be right here." Lucy went to her room. The 3 adults stood in the doorway, a triangle of complicated history. Rachel was the first to speak. "I didn't know you were seeing someone. You don't get to have opinions about my life anymore," Ethan said, but without heat. "I'm not trying to cause problems. I miss her. I want to be part of her life again." "Rachel, you can't just..." He stopped, trying to find words that weren't cruel. "You left. For 3 years, you've been mostly absent. You can't show up unannounced and expect everything to be fine. I know that, but I want to try. I want to rebuild." Claire stepped forward. She looked at Rachel with something that wasn't quite sympathy, but wasn't judgment either. "Lucy needs consistency," Claire said quietly. "Not grand gestures, not occasional visits when it's convenient. If you want to be part of her life, it has to be real. It has to be regular, and it has to be about what she needs, not what you need." Rachel looked at her. "You don't have kids. How would you know?" "You're right. I don't. But I know what it's like to have a parent who shows up when it's easy and disappears when it's hard. And I know the damage that does." Rachel's face crumpled. "I'm not a monster. I couldn't breathe. Being a mother, being responsible for this tiny person, it felt like drowning." "I understand that," Claire said, and she sounded like she meant it. "But you made a choice, and now Lucy has to live with that choice. So if you want to rebuild, you have to do it on her terms, not yours." Ethan watched Claire standing there, defending his daughter, and felt something settle in his chest. This woman who was terrified of commitment, who'd spent years keeping everyone at arm's length, was choosing to stay. To be present, to fight for Lucy. Rachel wiped her eyes. "What if I want to start with phone calls? Regular ones. Every Sunday? We can try that," Ethan said carefully. "But Rachel, if you commit to this, you have to follow through. No more broken promises. Lucy deserves better than that." "I will. I promise." She left 20 minutes later, after a brief, awkward goodbye with Lucy. The door closed behind her, and silence filled the apartment. Lucy went to bed early that night, emotionally exhausted. Claire stayed, helping clean up the dinner they'd barely touched. They moved around each other in the small kitchen, not talking, both processing what had happened. Finally, Dishes done. They sat on the couch. Thank you, Ethan said, for staying. For what you said to Rachel. Claire was quiet for a moment. I know you did. Ethan. She stopped, then started again. I need you to understand something. I'm not good at this. At being the person someone depends on. I'm terrified I'll wake up one day and realize this is too much, that I need space, that I made a mistake. His chest tightened. Are you saying you want to end this? No. I'm saying. She looked at him, and her eyes were filled with fear and determination in equal measure. I'm saying I want to try anyway, even though I'm scared, even though I don't know if I can do this. But I need you to know that Lucy comes first. Always. If this whatever we are, if it ever hurts her, we stop. Immediately. Ethan reached for her hand. She let him take it. Lucy already loves you, he said quietly. And that terrifies me too. Because if you leave, it won't just be me you hurt. I know. That's why I almost left today. It would have been easier, but you didn't. No. Because Lucy asked me to stay, and I realized running away to protect myself would just make me another person who left her. And I can't do that. She looked down at their joined hands. My father used to tell me that love was about grand gestures, she said. Big declarations, dramatic moments. But watching you with Lucy, I've learned it's actually about showing up every day, even when it's boring or hard or you'd rather be somewhere else. That's the only kind of love that lasts, Ethan said. I want to be that person, the one who shows up, for both of you. But Ethan, I need you to promise me something. What? If I start to fail, if I'm hurting Lucy or letting her down, you have to tell me. Don't let me become my father. Don't let me be the person who's always choosing something else. Ethan pulled her closer. She leaned into him, and it felt like coming home. I promise, he said. But Claire, you're already showing up. You have been for months. You just didn't realize it. 10 months later, on a Thursday afternoon, Claire stood in front of Lakeside Elementary with a ring box in her pocket and her heart in her throat. She'd talked to Ethan about this. More than talked, they'd spent weeks discussing it, working through the implications, making sure they were both ready. But there was one person whose approval mattered more than anyone's. Lucy came out with her usual Thursday enthusiasm, but she stopped when she saw Claire's expression. Miss Claire, are you okay? Claire crouched down to Lucy's level. I need to ask you something important. Can we sit on the bench? They sat. Claire took a deep breath. Lucy, you know I care about you and your dad very much, right? Lucy nodded, suddenly serious. I know. Well, I've been thinking about asking your dad to marry me. But before I do that, I wanted to know how you felt about it. Lucy's eyes went wide. You want to marry Dad? I do, but only if it's okay with you, because if we get married, that means I'll be in your life permanently. I'll be there for school events and birthdays and bad days and good days. I'll be another person you can depend on. She pulled out the ring box, not for Ethan, but for Lucy. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm in the shape of a book. This is a promise, Claire said, her voice shaking slightly. A promise that I'm choosing you, that I'll show up, that I'll be here even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Lucy looked at the bracelet, then at Claire. When she spoke, her voice was small but clear. What if you change your mind? What if you leave like Mom did? Claire's eyes filled with tears. I can't promise I'll be perfect. I'll make mistakes. I'll have bad days. But Lucy, I promise I will never leave. I will never make you feel like you're not enough or like you're the reason I can't be happy. How do you know? Because you already make me happy. You and your dad, you've taught me what real strength looks like. It's not about being perfect or having everything under control. It's about showing up and trying, even when you're scared. Lucy was quiet for a long moment. Then she held out her wrist. Can you put it on? Claire's hands shook as she fastened the bracelet. Lucy admired it, turning her wrist so the charm caught the light. So, does this mean you're going to be my stepmom? If that's okay with you. Lucy threw her arms around Claire's neck. It's okay. I want you to stay. That evening, Ethan came home to find Claire and Lucy making dinner together. Flour everywhere, both of them laughing at some private joke. Claire looked up when he entered, and the smile on her face made his breath catch. "We need to talk," she said, and Lucy giggled. Half an hour later, Lucy was supposedly in her room doing homework, but was definitely listening through the door as Claire asked Ethan to marry her in their small living room. He said yes before she'd even finished the question. They got married 6 months later. Small ceremony, close friends only, with Lucy as the official ring bearer. Rachel sent flowers and called afterward to congratulate them. She'd kept her promise about the Sunday calls, and slowly, carefully, she was rebuilding a relationship with her daughter. It would never be what it could have been, but it was something. It was real. At the reception, Claire stood to give a toast. She looked at Ethan and Lucy, at the family they'd built from broken pieces and second chances, and knew exactly what she wanted to say. "I used to think strength meant having everything under control," she began. "It meant never needing anyone, never showing weakness, never letting anything matter enough to hurt you." She paused, looking at her new family. "But Ethan and Lucy taught me that real strength is showing up. It's choosing to care, even when it's terrifying. It's admitting you don't have all the answers and trying anyway. It's letting people see you, really see you, and trusting them not to leave." She raised her glass. "To families we choose, to promises we keep, to showing up every single day, even when, especially when it's hard." Lucy, who wasn't supposed to have champagne but had been given sparkling cider in a fancy glass, stood up on her chair. "And to Miss Claire," she announced, "who does the best dragon voices and always keeps her promises." The room erupted in laughter and applause. Later, when Lucy was asleep in the hotel room they'd booked for the night and Ethan and Claire were slow dancing to music only they could hear, he pulled back to look at her. "Are you scared?" he asked softly. Claire smiled, terrified. "But I'm here anyway. That's all we can ask," Ethan said. "To keep showing up, even when we're scared." She kissed him, and unlike that first kiss in her office, desperate and uncertain and exposing, this one felt like coming home. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. People made promises and broke them, fell in love and fell apart, hurt each other and forgave each other and tried again. But in that moment, in that room, with the woman he loved in his arms and his daughter safe nearby, Ethan knew they'd found something rare. Not perfect, not without fear or doubt or the occasional late-night panic about whether they were doing everything wrong, but real, built not on grand gestures or passionate declarations, but on the quiet courage of choosing each other. Every single day, showing up, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. And that, they'd both learned, was what love really meant.